r/AskReddit. Redditors who clean up crime scenes. What's the most bizarre thing you've witnessed? Not safe for work. A family friend removes the deceased from their homes, etc. since they own their own funeral home. They said that the weirdest thing they saw was a woman lying face up in a tub and a man laying on top of her. When she took them apart, she knew why they were like that. Guy had domestic abuse problems and they were going through a separation. Kids in the other room. Mom in the bathroom doing her hair. The guy comes in and just stabs her several times. Puts her in the tub and places a knife in her hands while he jumps on top of her and stabs himself either in the chest or abdomen and bleeds out. She said she'll never forget how sad and unusual it was. Especially for those kids who thankfully were asleep. I think her mom found them. I hate thinking about it and I hope that family can heal. Open bracket. Hey, one I can answer. I clean up suicides, decomps, where the person has been dead for days or weeks before being found, and crime scenes. You find the obvious stuff like sex toys, drug paraphernalia. One time I found a maybe fictional, maybe autobiographical journal of how this guy lost his testicles in an angle grinder accident. This same guy had a small metal pipe, like a weed one-hitter, along with some kind of dried fruit, like cherries or small plums, hidden in a box in his closet. It was like he was smoking it. IDK. We are pretty versed in the world of drugs and we couldn't figure that shit out. As many first responders have already pointed out, the amount of brain and skull fragments left behind is a lot bigger than what I would have imagined. Shit, they'll leave eyeballs behind. I've seen over half of an intact brain. A skull fragment big enough to use as a bowl. Teeth. They get the biggest part of the body and roll out. They are not gonna spend an hour looking for all the giblets. That's why they pay us the big bucks. What's strange to me is that a lot of adults go to their parents' house to kill themselves. Kinda fucked up. Suicide season is not during the holidays. We are way more busy during spring than the end of the year. The most eerie thing is how often we do suicides in rooms that just look normal. It's hard to explain, but it's just strange to go into a normal looking bedroom with a half-drank Gatorade on the dresser, a half-read book on the nightstand, and a big old blood stain on the floor. Also seeing the different ways the families cope with the tragedy. Our service is expensive yo, and there's been times I thought I was gonna get hit when I told them our estimated price. Especially if it's grandma or grandpa that swallowed a bullet and half the fucking family tree is at the house. I've done suicides as young as 12 and as old as 80s. You get the people that are just on autopilot, that ask weird questions cause they really aren't on the same plane of existence. We tear out all the carpet in a room if a gun is used. CSF is clear and is also a BBP carrier, so if it looks clean, it might still be contaminated. We've had the carpet pulled and removed, and I've had family members ask, while they're looking at the slab concrete, if we are just gonna shampoo the carpet. You get the people that seem almost happy that the person is gone. I've heard people say, well, now that their kid is gone, we can finally take that cruise. IDK if it's just a coping mechanism, or if they're just massive assholes. I try not to judge. Keyword, try. I've got a ton. I used to do CSI work and was an autopsy tech, so I would both go to the scene, investigate, bring the body back to the morgue, and help with the autopsy. Anyways, this person murdered their spouse and stuffed the body into a fridge and buried it in the woods. When you have a body exposed to the element, you have normal decomposition to look forward to, such as insects, bloating/gases, skin coming off, bones showing, etc. Once you've seen a few, then you know that this kind of decomp/state of body is normal and you know what to expect. There are varying levels of stuff you deal with, but it's all within an expected spectrum of the job. Hope that makes sense. However, in this case, this person was sealed in, so you didn't have any of that. They were essentially stewing in there for almost a year, might have been longer. I don't remember the exact time. I wasn't there on scene when they found the person, only in the morgue to help with the autopsy. So I prep the room. Doctor comes in and I pull out the body from the fridge and wheel them into where we do the actual autopsy. Opened the bag and oh my point god. The smell. I'll never ever forget the smell. I've dealt with bodies in various stages of death and decomposition, but holy shit, this was on 10 other levels. Now the morgue has HVAC, air filter / fresheners, and all that, but they weren't effective at all for the smell. It was so bad I gagged, which I've never done before, and almost threw up in my mask. The doctor was struggling too. The doc double backed and almost looked like they were gonna faint. It was the purest, worst, most concentrated, extremely pungent ammonia smell you could think of. I had never smelled anything like that in my career at that point. If wine ages well, and is better with time, this ammonia smell did the exact opposite, and it was somewhere worse than anything you could think of. The smell stuck to us too, on our skin, for about a week, no matter how hard I scrubbed. I can still smell it, if I think about it. The texture of the body didn't help either. It was so slippery and wet that flecks of the ammonia fluid splashed onto my skin. The long gloves went up to my forearm, not all the way to my scrubs. It was the worst autopsy of my life. It took about 3 hours because we kept having to take breaks, and it was a difficult body to work on due to how fragile it was. It beat out everything else I saw, from the crazy accident fatalities, the interesting suicides, to even the person who had half their face eaten by rats and half their body covered in a sea of maggots and insects. Edit. Thanks for the gold. Also, RIP in barks, pun intended. Edit 2. HVAC, not HEPA. I don't clean them for a living, but had to clean a few apartments when my uncle managed an apartment complex. We had one tenant odd on heroin. He sat there for roughly 3 weeks before anyone noticed the smell. They took his body and left it to us to clean up. The dude vomited on the ceiling. There were little dry droplets of vomit all over the ceiling right above where he died, and to top it off he basically liquefied and left a puddle of gut juices on the concrete foundation underneath the carpet. I thought that shit was left to a professional team, but I guess it's optional, and if you don't want to pay for it, you can scoop the brains and blood up yourself. Oh, I have a story about someone who launched their entrails over a bathroom that's probably 81 square feet. I clean up biohazard material, dead bodies, for my company on occasion, because I'm one of the only two that's certified. My coworker went into a house to clean a body, but the boss failed to mention they had been dead for 2 weeks. Okay, whatever, I can deal with that. We walked to the house, and not only could you smell it from the start of the driveway, but all the windows were black. Okay, this dude had blackout curtains, I understand that. We suited up and went into the house, which was relatively clean given the circumstances. We knew he died in the bathroom, so we made our way upstairs and followed the flies. So, you know how flies swarm decaying things? Yeah, it wasn't blackout curtains in the bathroom. The windows were caked in so many flies that sunlight couldn't come in. My boss also failed to mention he died in the bathtub. You hear about bloating and blah blah blah, but do you know what happens when a body sits in a bathtub for 2 weeks and soaks up all that water? It explodes. The entrails and remains of this soup was all over the taking, the walls, the door. It was everywhere. There was no water in the bathtub, just this sickly pink colored stew. That was the most disgusting cleanup I've done by far. I can't even imagine what it sounded like when that happened. Edit. I love Reddit. Someone reposted my story and got 600 upvotes and gold. Oh well. My best friend used to have this job. Most of the bizarre stuff was cleaning up suicides. Found a guy's full intact mustache across the room when he blew his head off with a shotgun. One guy tried to kill himself by shooting his stomach with a small caliber pistol. He didn't die immediately, so he wrote tons of whacked out stuff on the walls with his blood, then finished the job. Crime scene cleaner here. My first suicide cleanup was quite an experience. Man shot himself in the head in his garage. I'll never forget needing to use pliers to pull teeth and skull fragments out of the drywall behind where he sat, or that blood and brain managed to make its way more than 50 feet across the garage. Most disturbing though was his pickup. We chose to take it to our company wash bay to pressure wash it and make sure it was as clean as possible. I cleaned it myself and was satisfied that I had done well. Inspected for blood and couldn't find anything, so I began driving it back to the owner's garage. On the way back a slight drizzle began and switched on the wiper blades. Imagine my horror as a chunk of brain streaks across my newly cleaned windshield. I pulled over quickly and cleaned it up, but it still makes me sick to think what would have happened if it didn't rain that day. This man's poor wife or daughter would have been met with that sight and been crushed again by the impact of suicide. That 10 years ago, and I'll never forget it. Now I triple or quadruple check every job. Okay, not a crime scene cleaner, but am a medic. Have a few bizarre ones. Came into a home to find a man who had attempted to commit suicide by putting a pistol under his jaw, but failed / had a second thought. He ended up having to crawl 5 feet away to where he had thrown the pistol after only blowing the left side of his face off to finish the job. The second one did the trick. Just about every surface in his living room had some remnant of the poor guy. He left behind 2 kids. Another time we had a husband who had caught his wife cheating and had turned on the garbage disposal and forced her arm down it. Massive hemorrhaging, but unfortunately she was DOA. Husband ended up with a self-inflicted shotgun wound. People really don't understand just how messy a shotgun can make things. Think the Hulk smashing a blood and brain filled Pinata. And this one was more weird than anything, but here goes. Older gentleman we were called to after police performed a wellness check, late 70s. Nice house, nice foreign car in the driveway. Pictures of prayers and crosses all over the house. We had into the bedroom and there he is naked except for what I assume was one of those sexy nun Halloween costumes. Honestly I don't know, but he ended up having a heart attack mid-pleasure time while choking himself with a rosary. Definitely one of the weirdest things I ever saw during my time working the box. Was dispatched to a vehicle vs pedestrian call a couple months ago, and when we arrived on scene it was like something out of a movie. Dude was running across a fairly busy 4-lane road and was hit by a car traveling about 55 miles per hour. After his head went through the windshield of the first vehicle, he then proceeded to be thrown into the opposite lane and was ran over and dragged about 20 yards by another vehicle. Once the coroner was on scene with traffic investigations, we proceeded to pick up his organs bit by bit. It was a fantastic anatomy lesson. Okay. Here is another story that will always stick out. The entire residence was absolutely tossed, as if someone was looking for something. However, this wouldn't end up being a typical robbery turned homicide. This was about to be way more bizarre. We get the man into the bag, so crime scene can take their photos. In the nearby toilet, we discover even more blood. Possibly up to at least a third of this gentleman's entire volume of blood in the john. It was just around that exact moment where another patrol officer was perusing around the residence when he started to find random objects covered in fecal matter. Eventually, he found more objects with a mix of fecal matter and blood. It then hit us just exactly what we were dealing with: extreme violent sodomy with foreign objects. Most of the objects were reasonable, I suppose. Smaller objects resembling the phallic shape, TV remotes, things of that like. Well, 3 of the objects stuck out that were discovered are what make this story. The first was a broom. Sure, you think, kinda skinny, right? Can't be that bad. Well, it was the depth up the grip of it that we were concerned about. This man definitely had his bowel perforated by how deep this thing went. The second object of note was a baseball bat, the contact end of it. Again, pretty deep, but significantly wider in girth. The final and most standout of the objects was a guitar. A really nice Stratocaster too. The tuning end of a guitar. The tuning knobs were all covered in a thick paste of fecal matter and blood. This man had been sodomized to death. At autopsy, the findings were obvious. However, what I had to do was something I'll never forget. After the primary evisceration was complete, the doctor wanted to completely excise the rectum. So I had to don a chainmail glove and, after rolling this poor guy onto his side, press inside his abdominal cavity to press his rectum out towards his anus so the doctor could pull it taut enough to cut out. After she had his guy's rectum out, which resembled one of those jelly-filled toys that when you hold them, they kinda fall inside themselves and through your hands. My 80s/90s baby friends should recall these guys. We then cut lengthwise upward to unfold the rectal tissue into a large rectangle to see the extent of the internal lacerations. Needless to say, deep, extensive, and numerous. The assailants have been apprehended. So that's the story about how I had to cut out a guy's butthole for science, medicine, and law. TLDR, man is murdered from being sodomized with the tuning end of a guitar. The people responsible have been caught.